Hey everyone, it's your buddy back again with another exciting fanfic, which is What If Naruto Was in One Piece Part 1. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. All the villagers were partying in the streets. Naruto, now without his trench coat, and Nojiko, now wearing a green vest, were sitting down drinking, watching. Naruto finished his drink and looked to Nojiko. So, how does it will finally being free of Arlong? He asked Nojiko. Nojiko looked over to him. It feels great, she exclaimed with a smile. I never thought I'd live to see the day when Arlong was gone. Naruto put his arm around her shoulder and pulled her in for a one-armed hug. Well, drink up, and party your SS off. Naruto yelled, raising his cup high. Nojiko smiled and raised her cup also. Nojiko. Naruto and Nojiko looked to their left and saw a boy running towards them wearing a orange shirt, plaid shorts, and a hat. Hey, Nojiko said, smiling at the boy. Did you hear? The boy asked, panting a little. Arlong Park's gone. Nojiko giggled. I know, isn't it great? She asked. I sure would like to meet the person responsible for that. The boy said excitedly. Nojiko pointed to Naruto. Well, Naruto here was one of the ones who helped, she said. The boy looked at Naruto wide-eyed. Really? The boy asked. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Well, I was one of those who helped. If you want the one who bear Arlong, then you want Luffy. Naruto said. He's the one wearing the red vest and straw hat right over there. Naruto said, pointing in front of him. The boy looked over to where Naruto was pointing and saw Luffy eating a lot of food, his right arm bandaged up. You sure that's him? The boy asked, seeing Luffy swallow a plate. Naruto chucked. Appearances can be deceiving, he said. Sanji, Usopp, Zoro. Ahhhh. Sanji and Usopp heard from the doctor's office. He's still at it, Usopp said from the table they were sitting at. Sanji took a drag from his cigarette. Well, you saw how Zoro looked after his fight, he said, looking over across the street. Yeah, anyone else would have died, Usopp said. Inside, Johnny and Yosaku were sleeping on beds as the doctor was working on Zoro. Ah, the doctor looked at Zoro. You dumb SS, did you think this would heal on its own? He said, sewing up Zoro's wound. Seriously, I thought pirates were supposed to be smarter than this. Don't you have a doctor? He finished, holding down Zoro. Doctor, they heard a voice say. Zoro looked up to the window above his bed. Luffy, he asked, seeing Luffy hanging on the window eating a piece of meat. That's a good idea, but I would like to get a musician first, Luffy said, taking another bit out of his meat. Why? Zoro asked a little painfully. Because pirates like to sing, Luffy said plainly. Zoro sighed. Okay, you have a point, but why a musician first? He asked. Luffy, ignoring him, looked over to the doctor. Hey old man, Luffy asked. Do you know where Nami is? I haven't seen her all day. The doctor looked away and thought. Well, he said, if Nami isn't here in the village, then there's only one other place I know she'll be. He told Luffy. Nami, Belmir's grave. Nami was sitting cross-legged, smiling in front of Belmir's grave marker, Genzo standing behind her, arms behind his back. Nami, what are you doing here? Genzo turned around and saw Naruto and Nojiko walking up. Your friends are looking everywhere for you, she said, stopping beside Genzo. Naruto, what are you doing here? Genzo asked Naruto. Naruto shrugged. Nojiko asked me to help find Nami, he said before grinning. But I think it's because she didn't want a awesomely and sexy man like myself out of her sight, he said, wrapping an arm around Nojiko's shoulder. Nojiko blushed. What? No, I don't. I really needed help, she said, still blushing. Shori, Naruto said with a grin. Nojiko, Genzo, Nami asked, turning her head to look at them. Do you think Belmir would let me become a pirate? Genzo and Nojiko gained a surprised look. A pirate? No way would she let her daughter go around with some treacherous pie. Quote. Nojiko interrupted him. Of course she would, but if she said no, would you listen to her? Nojiko asked with a smile. Nami turned around and stuck her tongue out. Got that right. Nojiko giggled. Genzo sighed then burst out laughing. Nojiko turned to him. Genzo, she asked. I see. Genzo said, pushing his hat down over his eyes. You really are her kids. He said, patting Nojiko on the shoulder. Look, Nami, you already made up your mind. He said, turning to walk away. Live your lives, it's what Belmir would have wanted. Nighttime. The villagers were still celebrating. Nojiko and Naruto were dancing together, and Zoro, now wearing a white shirt with 3 buttons at the top, all unbuttoned, drinking. Boy, I'm stuffed. Zoro looked up and saw Sanji walking over and sat down in front of him. It's a nice change of pace not having to cook, he said. He looked over to Zoro. How are you holding up? He asked. I'll be okay, I just need to rest for a bit, he said, taking another swig from his beer. He looked over to the crowd. How much longer can they keep this up? It's been 3 days now, he said as Sanji took out a cigarette. Well, do you blame them? Sanji asked, lighting up his cigarette. They've been under Arlong's rule for 8 years now. I'd be partying too. Suddenly Luffy came over, mouth full of meat and holding a bunch more. Sanji, where's that melon you had earlier go? He asked, mouth full. I want to try it. Zoro looked at Luffy. Don't talk with your mouth full, he said with a sigh. The raw ham melon? Sanji asked, taking a long drag from his cigarette. Raw ham melon, Luffy exclaimed. Sanji looked over to the crowd. The whole town is a buffet, good luck finding it. Zoro, with his eyes closed, said. He's gone. Sanji put out his cigarette and threw it in a pouch. 3 days of eating, it's a good thing he's made of rubber, he said with a smile. Well, I'm stuffed, to time to dance. Sanji started running towards a group of women with hearts above his head. Yoo-hoo, ladies. Zoro gained a tick mark. He tried to take another drink but noticed his cup has empty, shrugged and went to sleep. Usopp, now standing on some stacked up tables, was yelling out of a megaphone. I'm Captain Usopp and I defeated the strongest Arlong pirate, he exclaimed, and started singing with some of the crowd cheering him on. Naruto and Nojiko looked up with a sweat drop. He's full of himself, isn't he? Naruto asked. Nojiko giggled. I know. Nojiko reached up and kissed Naruto's cheek. What was that for? Naruto asked, blushing. That was for helping us with Arlong, she said, smiling. Gross. The boy sitting beside them said. Well, I thought you'd be more depressed, Nojiko said with a smirk. What do you mean? The boy asked. I thought you would be like, why didn't this happen before my daddy died? Why is life so unfair? She said, head leaning on her hand. The boy looked down in thought. Well, at first I was. The boy said. I've decided to think about the future. Nojiko raised an eyebrow. Oh, she said. Yeah, after tonight we can start anew. Whining will get us nowhere. He finished. Nojiko smiled, reached over and pinched his cheek. Ow, ow, ow. The boy said painfully. It's no fun if I can't pick on you for being a kid, she said. So you decided to hurt me instead, you old punk. The boy yelled with a tick mark. Nojiko laughed. Punk. That's right. Naruto smiled. Hey, I'm going to go and check up on Nami, he said, getting up. Nojiko smiled and stood up also. Okay, I'll go with you, she said, hooking her arms with one of his. The duo walked off. Nami, doctor's office. Think you can remove it? Nami asked him, laying down on her stomach topless with a towel draped across her back. I'll do my best, the doctor said, holding a cloth on her shoulder and dipping another in alcohol. But this is a tattoo, there's bound to be some scarring left, he said, putting the alcohol on her shoulder. I should have known that I'll never truly be rid of it, she said. Hey doc, I think I would like a new tattoo, she said, handing him a piece of paper. Like this. Naruto and Nojiko walked in. Well, you just can't stay in your clothes, can you, Nami-chan? Naruto teased. Nojiko, Nami whined. Why did you tell him that story? She asked, hiding her embarrassed blush with her pillow. Nojiko burst out laughing. Belmir's grave. Your daughters are just like you, Belmir, Genzo said, pouring some beer over the grave marker. It's like I'm looking at you every time I see them. He said with a smile. We're not going to waste a single moment of our time. He looked to the moon. I'm happy for the first time in years. He finished. Raw ham melon. Genzo jumped a little. He looked behind him and saw Luffy mouth full of meat looking around. Huh. I must have got. Genzo yelled. Be quiet. Luffy looked towards him. Huh, a grave. Did someone die? He asked. Yes, a long time ago. Genzo answered. Oh, I give you my deepest. Genzo deadpanned. Deepest condolences. Luffy smiled. Right that. Genzo looked put to the sea. Look, I know Nami's going with you. She's dead set on becoming a pirate. He said, hands in his pockets. But if any of you do anything to hurt her, I'll kill you. He said seriously. We're not going to hurt her. Luffy said plainly. Genzo turned around and gave Luffy a hard look. You're sure? He yelled. Sure, I'm sure. Luffy said confusedly. Village. All the villagers were sleeping on the ground and Usopp was still singing with a dazed look in his eyes. Yeah, let's sing Captain Usopp the Great for the 300th. He fell asleep. Zoro was still asleep in his spot. Johnny and Yosaku are asleep with bottles around them, and Sanji was asleep with women surrounding him. Over in the grass on a blanket, Naruto and Nojiko laying down looking at the stars. Nojiko sighed. You know, she asked as Naruto turned his head to look at her. I never thought I would be able to relax like this for a long time. She said looking at the stars. Naruto smiled. Well, get used to it. Nojiko looked over to him and smiled. And it's all thanks to you guys. Naruto blushed. In embarrassment. I didn't do anything special. He said. Yes you did. Nojiko said putting a hand on his cheek. You kept Nezum from shooting me, and from stealing Nami's money. She smiled and continued. You fought Chu, kept Arlong from throwing Luffy in the ocean, and kept Nezum from taking all the money that was on the island. She leaned forward and kissed Naruto. You may have not beat Arlong, but you did help. She finished when she pulled back from the kiss. Naruto blushed and started sputtering gibberish. Nojiko giggled, and shut him up with another kiss. Naruto, now ready, smiled into the kiss, wrapped an arm around Nojiko and pulled her on top of him. Nami. Back at her house, Nami just finished pulling the bag full of the money she collected into the kitchen. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and put a note onto the bag. She looked around and saw a picture of her, Nojiko, and Belmir on the nightstand beside the bed. She smiled, remembering all the good times she had. She put the picture down and opened the drawer and pulled out an old map. She rolled it up, turned around and saw Belmir sitting down at the table smiling. Well, we did it, Belmir. Nami said. It only took 8 years, but we're finally free. She continued with a smile. Just like you told us when we were kids, be brave and smile, and nothing can stop you. I'm finally going to sail around the world. She looked at Belmir. But don't worry, I'm going with good, strong people like you. She wiped a tear from her eyes. I just wanted to say goodbye, because I don't know if, or when I'll be back. She looked back only to see Belmir is gone. Nami started walking outside. When she stepped outside, she felt someone push her. Shocked, she looked back only to see no one's there. Nami. Nami turned around and saw Nojiko, and Naruto walking up to her. Hey Nojiko. Naruto, what are you doing here? She asked. He's here to help me pack. Nojiko said plainly. Nami looked confused. What? She asked. Are you going somewhere? Nojiko smirked. Yep, I'm going with you. Nojiko replied. What? Nami asked. Why? Nojiko waved her off. You think I'm going to wait here while you get to have all the fun? You're nuts. She said. Are you sure? Nami asked. I mean, I wouldn't mind having you there. Another girl would be great. She said. I'm sure. Nojiko said, walking inside. Nami looked at Naruto. I'm sure you have something to do with this. Naruto grinned sheepishly. I guess you could say that. He said. But it's still Luffy's decision. Nami sighed. Well, I guess I can spend time with Nojiko now. Naruto smirked. Yeah, well, for me, another hot girl on board is always a plus. Nami swatted his arm. Pervert. She said plainly. Naruto laughed while walking inside with Nami following. Naruto looked around and saw Nojiko looking at a picture. He walked over, and saw the picture. Who's that? Naruto asked. Nojiko looked over to him with a sad smile. This is our mother Belmir. That's your mother? Naruto asked. Nami and Nojiko looked at Naruto oddly. How do you know Belmir? They asked at the same time. Belmir was a friend of my parents. Naruto said. Last time I saw her was when I was. 6. 7. She visited my parents a few times. He finished. Nami walked over to him. How did your parents know Belmir? She asked. They were in the same division together in the Marines. He answered. Belmir's never mentioned you. Nojiko said looking at Naruto. Naruto shrugged. I think they asked her not to. They had a lot of enemies, outside and inside the Marines. Nami and Nojiko looked on confusedly. What do you mean inside too? Nojiko asked. Naruto sighed. My parents were really strong. In fact, my dad could have made admiral after a while, but there were people who were jealous of them and someone with them on a mission betrayed them by giving their coordinates to a powerful pirate. Naruto continued. Like I said when I last saw her was at their funeral. Nojiko hugged him. I'm sorry, she said. Naruto hugged her back. They finished packing and went to sleep. Morning. The villagers gathered around the Straw Hats ship, the Going Merry. A ship with a ram's head on the front. Hey, where's Naruto? He's coming, isn't he? Luffy asked looking around. Yeah, he just went to get his boat to bring his stuff over. Zoro said coming over the ship's ladder. That all the supplies? Luffy asked. Yeah, replied Sanji. Hey. They looked over and saw Naruto and Nojiko sailing over. Nojiko-chan. Sanji greeted with a heart for an eye, ignoring Naruto. Naruto and Nojiko got out of their boat and walked up to them. I would like to join your crew, Luffy. Nojiko said plainly. Okay, why? Luffy asked, tilting his head. I don't want my sister to have all the fun. She replied. Sure. Luffy shrugged. Nojiko took a couple of her bags and started climbing up. I'll tell you the same thing I told that Straw Hat kid. Naruto jumped and looked to his side and saw Genzo staring at him. Okay. Naruto said. If you hurt her, I'll kill you. Naruto shrugged. I'll protect her with my life. He said. He reached into his pocket and handed Genzo a piece of paper. That's the frequency to my Den Den Mushi. I carry one in my boat to call the Marines when I needed them to come to me for the bounties I picked up. Naruto said, putting his hands in his pockets. I'll put it in the Going Merry so you can keep in touch with them. Naruto said, wailing over to his boat and started unloading. A little while later, after saying goodbye to Johnny and Yosaku, the Straw Hats were waiting for Nami to show up. Well, should we go? Usopp asked, putting the last of the supplies away. Wait, Nami's not here yet. Sanji said. Zoro looked out to the villagers. Maybe she's not coming. Sanji got in Zoro's face. What do you mean? If you're trying to hit on her, I'll break your freaking neck. He yelled. Usopp gained a thoughtful look. Maybe he's right, he said. Sanji stopped yelling at Zoro to stare at him. What do you mean? He asked, lighting a cigarette. I mean, the only reason she was traveling in the first place was to get 100 million berries and free the village. He said to them. She's already done that. There's no reason for her to keep traveling. Usopp finished. The villagers started whispering. Where's Nami? One asked. I don't know, I'd thought she would be here by now. Another said. What? Genzo yelled up to Nojiko. 100 million berries, she left all of it? He asked. Nojiko shrugged. She left it all at our house. She replied. She doesn't want at least some of it? The doctor asked her. She'll steal more. Nojiko said. Naruto came over. I still have like 20 million left from my last bounty. We should be fine for a while. He said, wrapping his arms around Nojiko from behind. There she is. Sanji yelled, pointing over behind the villagers. Everyone looked and saw Nami looking down at the ground. Now wearing a skirt and a plain white t-shirt. Nami. Everyone yelled. Set the sails. Nami said, breaking out in a sprint. Huh, why is she running? Usopp asked. She said, set the sails. Luffy and Nojiko said together. They started pulling up the anchor and setting the sail. Nami weaved through the crowd till she jumped up on the ship. She lifted her shirt a little and a bunch of purses and wallets fell out. Hey, my money's gone. A villager said. Mine too. Another said. Nami, you really need to lean to keep your clothes on. Naruto said to Nami after seeing her kiss a berry note. Shut up. Nami said with a tick mark. What, I'm not complaining. Naruto replied. Nojiko slapped him on the head. Stop teasing Nami, Naruto-kun. Naruto grumbled. Yeah Noji-chan. Naruto looked at Nami. You sure that's how you want to leave Nami-chan? He asked. Yep. Nami said plainly. Boys. Naruto and Luffy looked to Genzo. Remember what I told you? Naruto and Luffy gave thumbs up. Yeah, got it. They replied. Nami looked up to Belmir's grave. Well, I'm finally living my dream. See you later, Belmir. Nami thought. She looked back to everyone. Alright, let's set sail. She yelled. Yeah. They all replied. Naruto walked over to Nami. Hey, where did you want me to put the berries I brought? He asked her. Berries? Nami asked. Yeah, I've brought like over 20 million from my last bounty. He said. Suddenly Nami's eyes were replaced with berry signs. I think I'm going to like you being with us, Naruto-kun. I'll put them below deck. She said, walking inside. Naruto shrugged and walked inside. Oh, by the way, he said, getting everyone's attention. I have a Den Den Mushi here so you can keep in touch with friends and family. Naruto said, pointing to the Den Den Mushi. It looks like the one they have on the Sunny Go. You just need to send Fei Kunci to them first. He continued. I already gave Genzo the frequency. He finished. Everyone nodded and went to go relax, and Naruto went to finish unpacking and take a look around the ship. Going Merry early morning. Naruto was brushing his teeth on the deck of the Going Merry in his black and white camouflage pajamas pants, shirtless with a towel over his shoulder. His bandana was gone, showing his spiky blonde hair. He spit out his toothpaste, took a sip of water from the cup off the railing, swished it around and spit it into the sea. He suddenly felt a pair of arms wrap around his stomach, and a pair against his back. He smiled and turned around, and wrapped his arms around Nojiko, who was wearing her pajamas of blue pants and a white t-shirt. Morning, Noji-chan. He said, smiling down at Nojiko. She smiled. Good morning, Naruto-kun. She said before leaning up to give him a quick kiss. How was your night? Naruto asked when they ended the kiss. It'll take some getting used to the room swaying, but I had a good night. Nojiko said with a yawn. How about you? Naruto stretched before replying. It was fine. Once I came out here, man, can those guys snore. He said, rubbing the back of his head. Nojiko giggled. Well, I'm going to get dressed. She said, walking back inside. Naruto smiled and walked in after her to go get dressed also. Later. You raised your prices again? Nami asked a seagull, now wearing a green shirt and black skirt with 3 yellow circles on each side. The seagull looked on sadly, wearing a hat with a newspaper pouch and a money pouch around its neck. Naruto walked over, now wearing his bandana, a pair of faded jeans with holes on the knees, and a black t-shirt. Easy now, Nami-chan, it's not his fault. He said, taking some berry bills out and putting them in the seagull's money pouch. There's a little extra also. The seagull saluted, then flew away. The next time you raise your prices, I'm not paying. Nami yelled at the seagull. Nami, no need to fret, it's just a paper. Usopp said, sitting on the deck working on his slingshot ammo. You don't need to save every berry to save your village. Nami turned around and shot him a hard look. You're so stupid, I'm saving money for me now. She threw her arms wide and smiled. I'm not going to be one of those poor pirates who can't even dress up. She finished. Okay, calm down. Usopp said, looking back to her. Luffy tried getting a tangerine, but Sanji kicked him away into Usopp, who was busy putting hot sauce into a ball, getting it into his eyes. Ah! Usopp screamed and started running around in circles. Oh, come on, I just want one of them. Luffy said, looking up to Sanji and Nojiko, who was tending to the tangerines. No. Sanji said, crossing his arms. These tangerines are Nojiko's and Nami's, I won't have you ruining them. His eye was replaced with a heart. Nami, Nojiko, do you see I'm protecting your trees? He asked. Yeah, you're doing a real good job, Sanji. Nami said, sitting down reading the newspaper. Zoro looked on from the other side of the ship. Old Sanji's getting used, poor bastard. He said. I only want one tangerine, you're so mean. Luffy said, sitting on the railing, whined and stuck his tongue out. No. Sanji yelled from his spot. Luffy grinned. Oh well, I'm still happy anyway. He said, looking at the tangerines. The world's still a pretty turbulent place. Nami said, reading a page from the newspaper. They just had another coup in the villa. She said. Suddenly 2 pieces of paper flew out when she turned the page. What's that? Luffy asked, seeing the papers float down to the deck. Nami and Usopp had surprised looks, while Luffy had a huge grin. Naruto, Nojiko, and Sanji looked on while Zoro slept. Whaaa. They all exclaimed. With Marines. A bunch of Marines were sitting down across from each other talking. So you're saying their powers are too much for our branches to handle? A Marine asked. Yes. One in front of them said. Wearing a blue striped shirt, pink pants, shoes matching his shirt, and green curly hair. Even though he just created his pirate crew, he's defeated strong pirates. He said, pointing to the 3 bounty posters behind him. Buggy the Clown $15 million, Don Krieg $17 million, and most recently, Sawtooth, Arlong $20 million. He continued. All strong pirates in their own right. He even has Naruto, Maelstrom, Uzumaki join up with him, whose defeated pirates worth at least $40 million. He put up Naruto's and Luffy's bounties. I know a $30 million for Luffy, and $50 million for Naruto's are globally unprecedented for a first bounty. He said, looking to the other Marines. But I think it's best to destroy such evil before they become too strong. He finished. Outside, a bunch of Marines wearing coats with the kanji for justice on the back were standing at attention, when a Marine with a red hat came out. If you want to flee, then do so now. He yelled to them. We are the protectors of peace in this world, and weakness won't be tolerated. He continued. The civilians count on you to wash away evil from the world. He said, raising a fist in the air. In the name of absolute peace. He finished. Yes, sir. The Marines yelled. Syrup Village. Miss Kaya, Miss Kaya. A man yelled, barging into a room. The man was a tall, formally dressed butler whose most distinguishing feature is his lamb-themed appearance. His hair is curly like a lamb's fleece and has 2 lamb horns sticking out of it. His lips also resemble those of a lamb's. Even his collar has a fleece around it. What is it, Mary? Asked a fairly tall, thin girl with blonde hair looking at a book. You've got to see this bounty. The now identified Mary said, showing her Luffy's bounty. She looked at it for a second before smiling. Oh look, it's Usopp, she said as Mary's sweat dropped. What? He asked. Usopp's on that poster, Kaya said as Mary turned the poster around. Oh yeah, he is there, isn't he? He asked, seeing the back of Usopp's head. Kaya smiled. He's finally living his dream, she said, looking out the window. Oh, speaking of Usopp, he sent a letter. Mary said, handing Kaya the letter. She opened it and read it and smiled. Usopp just says hi and gave me the frequency to the Den Den Mushi they've just put on the Going Merry, she said with a smile. Straw Hat Crew. Luffy started snickering till he busted out laughing, holding up his bounty poster. Alright guys, we're wanted criminals, he said between his laughing. $30 million berries. Usopp exclaimed, seeing Luffy's bounty. That's a lot of berries. Luffy exclaimed as Nojiko looked over to them from beside Naruto near the railing. That's nothing compared to Naruto-kun's bounty, she said, and took the poster from Naruto's hand and showed it to them. $50 million berries, she said with a smirk as everyone's eyes bulged out of their heads. Man, Luffy whined. Naruto's bounty's higher than mine, he said as Naruto shrugged. I guess Nezumi wasn't kidding, he said. Good thing I got him back. He finished with a big grin, eyes closed. Nojiko looked at him confused. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? She asked Naruto. Naruto just smirked. I recorded y'all's conversation and I gave it to Genzo. Flashback. Here. Naruto said, giving Genzo a small den den mushi. What's this for? Genzo asked, looking at the den den mushi. I recorded yours and Nezumi's conversation with this. Naruto said, smirking. Genzo's eyes widened. Give that to the Marines, not with Nezumi, next time you see them. Also, I know Nami will at least leave some of the money she stole with you. He said, getting his boat ready. Make sure to spend it fast and put everything in Nezumi's name. Genzo stared at him. Why? He asked confusedly. Naruto sighed. That money's stolen even before Nami took it. He said, putting his hands behind his head and closed his eyes. The Marines will still take it because of that. Naruto smiled. If you put the purchases in Nezumi's name and tell everyone to say he stole all the money for himself, there will just be more evidence that he's corrupt. Genzo smiled at that. And he'll be put in jail. Genzo said as Naruto nodded. Yes. Flashback end. Naruto looked to Nami. Like I told Genzo, the money was still stolen, another Marine would just take it for the government. He said as everyone gained a thoughtful look. You're right. Nami said with a sigh. Meanwhile, Usopp checks out Luffy's poster again. Check it out, I'll be seen all over the world. He said excitedly. Girls might fall for me too. Sanji came rushing over. What, you're on there? Sanji asked, looking over the poster. Where are you? I don't see you. He said, annoyed that Usopp got on the poster. Usopp pointed to the back of his head. I'm right there. He said excitedly. Sanji sat down on the deck looking out at sea with a tick mark. Yeah, the back of your head. He said plainly. Don't be so glum. Usopp said with a smile. You don't have to be a captain to get one of these, just look at Naruto. Sanji perked up. Really? He asked hopefully. Yeah, just work real hard. Usopp said. Sanji, Usopp, and Luffy started cheering as Nami looked on. You guys have no idea how much dangerous our lives just got. She said, hand on her face. All of our lives will be in constant danger now. She said plainly. Naruto walked over and put his hand on her shoulder. Don't worry so much, Nami-chan. He said with a smile. I'll protect you. Nami smiled and hugged him. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Usopp looked over. You mean all of us, right? He asked as Naruto looked at him for a moment. Hell no, y'all can take care of yourselves. Nami looked at them all and said. Alright, now we can't relax as much as we could before now, so keep your guards up for anything. Meanwhile, Zoro was looking up at the sky. A 30 and 50 million berries bounties. He thought seriously. With bounties that high, the Marine HQ will probably take action. He looked over to the others. And bounty hunters will too. He sighed deeply. And with bounties that high, they'll be strong ones. He finished his thoughts. On the ocean. Meanwhile, out on the ocean a few miles from the SHC is an old beat-up Marine ship. All the Marines were all out of shape or too skinny. Inside sat an average-sized Marine that wore a white pinstripe suit. His hair was well combed and he had a scar under his left eye and bolts attached to his knuckles, drinking with bounty posters on the wall. Damn, this cheap drink is making me sick. He said, hiccuping. How I long for the old days where I was surrounded by beautiful women, and drank the finest wine. He said, reminiscing. But it all changed when I ran into that waiter. He said angrily. I was demoted from lieutenant, and forced to work on this hunk of junk. He said as one of the Marines came inside. Former Lieutenant Full Body. He said, tripping over his feet. Full Body looked on annoyed. What do you want? He asked. I have new wanted posters. The Marine said from his spot on the deck. Full Body sighed. Just put them on the table. He said as the Marine put the posters on the table. It's not like we can do anything anyway, being in the middle of no. Full Body stops and his eyes widened when he looked at the posters. Flashback. Who's the captain of this ship? Full Body asked, yelled to the ship beside his. Luffy stood up. I'm Monkey D. Luffy. Luffy introduced himself. I'm Captain Usopp. Usopp introduced himself as Luffy. Sweat dropped. We just made our flag a few days ago. Luffy said to Full Body. End flashback. Yeah, that's him. Full Body said he looked over to the other poster. Hey, that's Naruto. He said, standing up. This is great, now I can get these two and get my rightful rank back. He said, running outside. Men, attention. He yelled as the other Marines scrambled in front of him. Full Body sighed, looking at his men. Listen up, men. He ordered. We must prepare for battle. He said, arms crossed behind his back. Battle, huh? One Marine asked lazily. Where's this battle at? Full Body gained a thoughtful look. Well, let's see. He said. We could stop by that sea restaurant I was at a while ago. He said as his men started getting excited. Cool, a restaurant. One Marine said. All right, a feast, captain paying. Another said. Stop that. Full Body yelled. We're not having a fay. He stopped as a ship went right past him with a skull wearing a straw hat on the sail and flag. He looked and saw Luffy grinning, and Usopp staring at him. That's him. Full Body yelled as they passed him. Men, hard to port, our target's getting away. He yelled to his men as they turned around. Man, that looks like they just came out of battle, it barely floats. Luffy said, looking at the marine ship. Usopp shook his head. It's a shame putting scrap ships on the sea. He said as the ship came up beside them. They saw a man in a suit put his foot on the railing. This is not a scrap ship, are you blind? He asked them. How could you forget? Iron Fist, Full Body. Full Body asked, shaking his fist at them. Oh, yeah, you're that Marine I saw. Luffy exclaimed, pointing at Full Body. What's wrong, stranded? Need any help? He asked as Full Body gained a tick mark. Stop fooling around. Full Body yelled, holding up Luffy's and Naruto's posters. I'm here to arrest you, and Naruto. He said with a grin. Luffy just grinned. Yeah, that's me, and Naruto, hey Nar. He stopped seeing Naruto wasn't around. Huh? He asked. Where did he go? He asked, tilting his head. Inside, going merry. Naruto and Nojiko were inside hers, and Nami's room, making out on the bed. How did I get so lucky getting you? Naruto asked, pulling back from the kiss. Nojiko smiled. I don't know myself, she said as she wrapped her arms around his neck and pulled him into another kiss. Naruto, hearing something, pulled back from the kiss. Did you hear something? He asked, looking up to the ceiling. Nojiko pulled his head down. No, she said, and resumed making out with Naruto. Suddenly he heard cannon fire. Okay, now I know you heard that. Naruto said, reluctantly removing from the kiss. Yeah, maybe you should go check it out. Nojiko said. With another quick kiss, Naruto ran out to see what the commotion is. Outside a few seconds earlier. Men, ready the cannon. Full Body yelled as his men got the cannon ready. Huh? What's going on? Nami asked, looking up from the newspaper. Zoro opened his eyes and looked on as Usopp looked fearfully. Guess they're going to shoot. Luffy said plainly. They're aiming right at us. This is bad. This is real bad. Usopp repeated. I've got this. Luffy said as he pulled back his arm. Why don't you let me handle this, Luffy? Zoro said behind Luffy, holding his sword. Yeah, let Zoro handle this, you'll just mess this up. Usopp said, pulling Luffy back. Fire. Full Body yelled as the cannon fired. Zoro pulled his sword out and sliced the cannonball in half as it came flying to him, in both halves hitting the ocean. Whoa, that's cool. Luffy exclaimed as Usopp's jaw was dropped. I was napping. Zoro said, annoyed, putting his sword back in the sheath. Naruto came barging out the door from inside a few seconds later. What the hell was that? He asked, looking over and saw Full Body. Full Body, is that you? He asked, looking at Full Body. You know him, Naruto? Usopp asked Naruto. In passing, when I turned in Bounty's where he was stationed at. Naruto said. He's a real jerk to everyone except Captain Hina. Naruto finished with a grin. Full Body gained a blush and a tick mark. Men, fire again. He yelled as his men prepared the cannons. Well, that's bad. Really bad. Luffy said, looking at the cannon. What is? Usopp asked, arms crossed over his chest, tilting his head. Suddenly the cannon exploded on the Marine's ship. That's was. Luffy said plainly. Their cannon had cracks on it. Usopp looked at Full Body's ship. You're right, that is bad. he said as the smoke cleared to show him and the Marines covered in soot. You brats don't mock a former Marine lieutenant. Full Body yelled as his ship came to the side of the Going Merry. We'll just go head to head, men follow me. He ordered his men as they jumped onto the Going Merry. Full Body pulled the fist with iron knuckles back. Your head is mine, he yelled as he hit Luffy's head and neck stretched back to the other side of the ship. Gomu Gomu no. Gum gum. He pulled his straw hat off and brought his head flying towards Full Body's and slammed against his head. Cane, bell. Full Body hit the railing of the ship as Naruto took care of the other Marines, hitting them back onto their ship. What's going on? A voice said. Everyone looked over and saw Sanji walking over without his jacket, wearing an apron. Full Body screamed at seeing Sanji. You've got a lot of balls, tough guy. Sanji said to Full Body. Attacking at lunchtime. He continued glaring down at Full Body. Unless you have a reservation, get the hell off. Full Body screamed while running back to his ship. What the hell is that waiter doing here? He asked as he and his men jumped into the water on the other side of his ship. Well, he's done, Luffy said, fixing his hat. Naruto walked over to the Marine ship. What are you doing, Naruto? Usopp asked, looking over to Naruto. Getting their ammo so they don't try to come after us, he replied, going into the ship. Plus it saves money on buying ammo ourselves. Nami perked up. Good idea, Naruto-kun, she said, raising her fist. She turned to everyone. Well, don't just stand there, help him out, she ordered as Luffy and Usopp ran over to help Naruto as Sanji went back in to finish cooking lunch and Zoro went back to sleep. Random island. Two guys were on a hill overlooking the ocean. One asleep, and the other looking through a telescope. Hey, I see something, the one looking said as the one sleeping got up and walked over. Here, let me see. The other one looked through the telescope and saw a small boat coming towards them. A few minuets later and more men, a man stepped off the boat. He's a tall and lean man, with black hair, a short beard, mustache and sideburns that point upwards. Wearing a wide-brimmed black hat decorated with a large plume, and a long, open black coat with no shirt underneath, with red, flower-patterned sleeves and collar. Light purple pants held up by a decorated belt and tucked inside overly large boot. With a golden cross-shaped necklace across his neck, and a large sword on his back. What do you want, am I Hawk? One man asked the now identified Mihawk. Calm down, I just want to speak to your captain, Mihawk said as the man ran off. Mihawk sighed. Camping out on an island, what a carefree man, Mihawk said calmly, walking in the direction the man ran off. Boss, the man from earlier yelled as he came to a group of people, stopping in front of a red-haired man sitting under an umbrella. The red-haired man wearing a black cloak over his shoulder with a white shirt underneath buttoned halfway, brown trousers, a red sash around his waist and 3 scars over his left eye and a goatee. The man on the ground pointed behind him. Hawkeye is. That's as far as he got when he looked behind him and saw Mihawk standing behind him. Hey there, Hawkeye, the red-haired man said, looking to the ground. To what do I owe the pleasure of your company, come to fight? He asked Miwok. Mihawk just stared at the man. Since you've lost your left arm, I've no intention of settling the score, Mihawk replied, reaching into his coat and pulling out a poster. I came across an interesting young boy who reminded me of someone from your stories, Mihawk said, showing the red-haired man the poster. The man grinned. Luffy, you've made it. The man looked to Mihawk and grinned. All right, Mihawk, I can't let you leave, he said seriously. He gave Mihawk a beer. Drink up, Mihawk, he said with a small blush from drinking. Weren't you hung over? Mihawk asked, looking at the man. Nope, not anymore, now drink up, the man said, grinning. He looked down and saw another poster besides Luffy's. Huh, who's that? He asked, picking up the poster. That's Uzumaki Naruto, he just joined up with Luffy's crew, Shanks, Mihawk replied as the now identified Shanks' eyes widened. Shanks suddenly grinned. Minato's and Kushina's boy, huh? Mihawk stared at Shanks. You knew his parents? He asked. Shanks nodded. Before they both became Marines, I stopped at their island a few times for a drink, he said, smiling a little. Naruto looks like Minato but has Kushina's face. He suddenly shuddered. She was scary as hell. One time when we were drunk I tried hooking Minato with this nice girl and I didn't know they were going out at the time. He said fearfully. She beat the crap out of me so hard I was in the hospital for a few months. He said, rubbing his chest as he felt a phantom pain. He shook his head. Now let's get drunk off our asses. He yelled as his crew cheered. Fuchsia Village. Outside of a bar a bunch of villagers were talking and holding Luffy's poster. Did you hear? One villager asked. Luffy's a wanted man now. Another villager said. Wow, a famous pirate came from our small village, ain't that great? An elderly voice cut them off. What's so great about that? Everyone turned and saw an old man with a stripped hat, gray hair, mustache and goatee, yellow buttoned shirt, and brown pants holding a cane. Come on now, Mayor, you mean you're not happy for Luffy? One villager asked. The mayor walked inside the bar and sat down at the countertop. Bunch of jerks. He grumbled. Just look at him, Mayor, he looks so happy. The barmaid said. She is a young woman with dark green hair, with a yellow kerchief, and a light blue button-up shirt. The mayor snorted, taking a drink. A pirate, he said as the woman giggled. He sent me a letter with a den mushi frequency he just put on his ship. She said. It also seems that Naruto, that nice young man who was here a little while ago, joined up with him too, she said, cleaning a glass. Can't you be happy for him? He's living his dream, she said as the mayor sighed. His dream, or fate? He said, looking up at the ceiling. Naruto's village. 1. In a bar, sitting in a booth, sat two people. The first was a fairly tall, light-skinned woman with brown eyes and straight, blonde hair. Her hair is waist-length with shoulder-length bangs framing both sides of her face, kept in two loose ponytails. And a purple mark on her forehead. She's wearing a grass-green haori with the kanji for gamble written in black on the back, inside a red circle. Underneath she wears a gray, kimono-style blouse, held closed by a broad, dark bluish-gray obi that matches her pants. Her blouse is closed quite low, revealing her sizable cleavage. She wears open-toed high heels and red polish on both her fingernails and toenails, and pink lipstick. The other was a tall man with waist-length, spiky white hair tied back into a ponytail, with two shoulder-length bangs that framed both sides of his face. He has red lines that run down from his eyes. He has a noticeable wart on the left side of his nose. Wearing a green short shirt, kimono and matching pants, under which he wore mesh armor that showed out of the sleeves and legs of his outfit. His outfit was completed with hand guards, a simple black belt, traditional Japanese getup, wooden sandals, a red haori with two simple yellow circles on each side. The woman's side, the gaki, got the short end of the stick. She said, drinking out of her bottle. I know Tsunade. The man said. But good news, Nezumi and his men were arrested the other day. Tsunade snorted. I heard Jiraiya. Naruto told me he recorded him saying he was working with Arlong. Tsunade said, finishing her drink. Naruto will have to watch his back more closely from now on. Jiraiya nodded. Next time you talk to him, tell him I'll send him some more training books. He said, picking up Naruto's poster. He'll make a name for himself. He said, gaining a perverted smirk. Maybe he'll get some hot ladies too. He said as Tsunade took the poster out of his hands. He already has a girl. She said with a smile. Jiraiya chuckled. Oh yeah, is she a looker? He asked. Tsunade handed him a picture. That's her and him, she said as Jiraiya looked over the picture. It was of Naruto, arm wrapped around a blue-haired girl with a tattoo on her right arm going across her chest, her head on his shoulder. Her name is Nojiko, she said, taking another drink. Well, she is a looker, and the tattoo draws attention to her chest. He finished with a perverted chuckle. Tsunade gained a tick mark and punched Jiraiya in the head, knocking him out. Pervert. Tsunade said, annoyed, looking at the picture. Be careful out there, Naruto-kun, she said with a small smile. SHC. Everyone was sitting on deck looking at a map. We're almost there, Nami said, looking at the map. And it looks like this, she said, pointing at a mountain on the map. Is the only way in. Reverse mountain. Zoro looked where Nami was pointing. What a pain, he said with an annoyed look. There's got to be a better way in. Naruto looked to them. Not unless you have a marine ship, he said, gaining everyone's attention. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? Nojiko asked from her spot beside him. Marines coat their ships' bottoms with sea stones so they can go into the calm belt around crap like that. Luffy tilted his head. Sea stones? He asked as Naruto looks at him. It's a stone that if someone with devil fruit powers touches it, it takes away their powers and makes it feel like you're in the ocean. He continued. Sea monsters can't sense them either unless they look directly at their ship. He said with a sigh. They also have jail cells coated with that stuff for pirates with devil fruit powers to keep them from escaping. He finished as Luffy nodded. First we need to stop off at an island, we need more food. He said as Nami drew everyone's attention back to the map. Then we should stop here. She said, pointing to a small island. It's a famous city known as Louchtown. She said. What's so famous about it? Luffy asked, arms crossed over his chest. It's where Gold Roger was both born and killed there. Naruto said, looking at Luffy with a smile as Nami nodded. Want to go there? She asked Luffy. Luffy nodded with a serious look. Yeah, let's go, he said as everyone stands up. This is the man who had the One Piece. I need to see where he was born and executed. Luffy said, looking out to the ocean. Let's set sail, he yelled as they set sail to Louchtown. Raise the anchor, Luffy ordered as Zoro tied the anchor onto the ship. Set the sails. Naruto and Sanji was on top of the sail running to the crow's nest after fixing it. They climbed down as Luffy was giving more orders. Nami and Nojiko walked outside. Hello Nami, Nojiko, Sanji said, walking past them inside with a blush on his face. Hello Sanji, they greeted him. Nami looked down at Luffy, Usopp, and Zoro and smiled. Come on Zoro, let's play tag, Luffy said to Zoro. No, Zoro said plainly, finishing tying the rope that held the anchor down. Oh, come on, it'll be fun, Usopp said, walking over. No, I'm late for my morning nap, Zoro said, walking away, hand on his neck. You're just afraid of losing, Usopp said with a smirk as Zoro stopped and gained a tick mark. That's not why, jerk, Zoro said, looking back at them angrily. Then why are you mad? Usopp teased. I'm not mad, Zoro yelled and started chasing them around the deck. Nami giggled a little watching them act like children. How do you stand them all the time? Nojiko asked with a sweat drop forming. You got to admit they're not boring, Nami said with a grin. Naruto walked over, hands in his pockets. Yeah, you got that right, he said with a smile. Nami looked at Naruto and noticed his necklace. Hey Naruto, she asked him. Naruto gave her his full attention. What's with that necklace? Naruto pulled his necklace up. This belonged to my godmother's grandfather, he explained. It looks expensive, Nojiko said with a thoughtful look. If I sold it, I could buy 3 mountains with gold mines in them. Everyone's eyes widened, even Luffy's, Usopp's, and Zoro's. Nami gained berry signs in her eyes. Wow, Naruto, is there more? She asked. No, Naruto said plainly. As far as I know, this is one of a kind, and something I'll never sell, he said with a small smile, letting his necklace fall back into place. It's like Luffy and his hat. Nami sighed. Too bad, I hope we find another gem like that, she said hopefully. Nami-chan, Nojiko-chan, the food's ready, Sanji said sweetly as he came outside drying his hands with a towel. Yo idiots, lunch is ready, he yelled to everyone else a bit more harshly. You can feel the love from him, can't you? Naruto asked with a deadpanned expression. Nojiko sighed. He's not that bad, Naruto-kun, she said beside Naruto. Naruto snorted. Yeah, to the female population maybe, he said, walking inside with Nojiko. Sanji looked over to Nami and saw her expression. Huh, something the matter, Nami-chan? He asked. Nami looked over to him and shook her head. No, nothing, let's eat, she said as she went inside. Me first, Luffy exclaimed, running inside past Sanji. Usopp ran past him as Zoro calmly walked inside. Wow, this looks great, Luffy said, looking at the food. You know Luffy. Nami said sitting down at the table. I was wondering whatever happened to Buggy. She asked as Luffy looked up from eating. Buggy the clown? Naruto asked from the end of the table. Nami nodded as she answered. Yes, when I first met Luffy I was stealing a map from Buggy. Oh, really? Naruto asked thoughtfully as Nami nodded. He's probably dead. Luffy said, mouth full of food. I wouldn't be too sure of that. Zoro said from his spot, taking a sip from his cup. Pirates are a stubborn bunch. He finished taking a bite out of his food. Here you go, Nami-chan, Nojiko-chan. Sanji said, putting some dessert down for Nami and Nijoko. Thanks, Sanji. Nami and Nojiko said, taking a bite out of their dessert. Oh, this is good, Naruto-kun here. Nojiko said, taking some of her dessert and fed Naruto. Naruto blushed. Noji-chan, that's embarrassing. Nojiko smiled. Oh, come on, Naru-kun, for me. She pouted with puppy dog eyes. Naruto sighed. Okay, anything for you, Noji-chan. He said as he opened his mouth. Nojiko smiled in victory and fed him. Nami laughed. You two are so cute together. She said in between her laughter. Sanji glared at Naruto. I don't know what she sees in you. He grumbled. Naruto smirked. I've said it once, I'll say it again. He said, looking at Sanji. I'm awesome, you're not. He continued with a cheeky grin. Face it, Sanji, the more awesome blonde on the ship is me. He finished pointing at himself as Sanji gained a tick mark and tried to kick him, but Naruto blocked it with his hand. Nice try, Sanji. Naruto said, letting go of Sanji's leg, and stood up. I'm going to take a nap, wake me up if something happens. Naruto said, walking out of the kitchen with his hands in his pockets. Later. Hey look, a hermit crab. Luffy said, taking a break from his cleaning to look at a hermit crab on the railing. Nami, Nojiko, do you think it came from your village? Luffy asked Nami and Nojiko, who were tending their tangerines with Naruto holding a basket for them to put the tangerines in. Probably. Nami said, looking back to Luffy. Or it could have come from Usopp's. She finished. Usopp looked up from cleaning a cannon. If it did, it traveled a long way. Usopp replied. Suddenly something rocketed past them in the sky. Huh? Did you say something, Nami? Luffy asked Nami. Nami looked back to Luffy. No, I didn't. She replied as Luffy looked to Nojiko, Naruto, and Usopp, who all shook their heads. Luffy, get back to work. Sanji yelled from the other end of the deck. All right, Luffy said, getting back to sweeping. Naruto smiled. Quite the crew, huh? Naruto asked as Nojiko and Nami giggled. Yeah, you're right, they replied. Night. They even argue even when they're asleep. Nami said, hearing the guys from the other room argue. Naruto smirked from his seat, arms around Nojiko, who's sitting in his lap. Yeah, they're quite the characters, ain't they? He asked as he let Nojiko go and stood up. Well, I guess I'll leave so you two can get your sleep. Naruto gave Nojiko a good night kiss and left the room. Good night, Nami. Nojiko said, getting into her bed. Night, Nojiko. Nami said as she turned off the light. Meanwhile, Naruto was outside looking at the stars from the railing. He looked over and saw the hermit crab farm earlier. Hey there, little buddy. He said, picking the crab up. It's dangerous for you there. Come on, I'll put you in something till we reach Logatown. Naruto said, walking inside. Putting the crab in a small box, he heard the den den mushi go off. Pura pura pura. Naruto walked over and answered. Hello. He said. Gaki. The person on the other end asked. Hey Tsunade-kasen. Naruto said with a smile. Why are you calling this late? He asked Tsunade. Some marines were here earlier stocking up their ship. I had to wait till they left. She said, sighing. Okay, what did you want to talk about? Naruto asked her. Just checking in on you. Tsunade said. I'm fine. Hey, while I have you, I want to ask you something. Naruto said, sitting down. Ask away, Naruto. Tsunade said. Luffy, the captain I told you about has this straw that he says belongs to a pirate named Shanks. He said. Is that the same Shanks you told me about? Tsunade was silent for a moment. It's possible there is only one pirate named Shanks that had a straw hat that I know of. She said thoughtfully. He told me last time he was here that he gave it to a boy. She finished. Huh, how about that? Naruto said, hand on his chin. Well, anyway, watch you back and keep in touch. Tsunade said as Naruto chuckled. Okay, I will. Good night, Tsunade-kasen. He said. Good night, Naruto-kun. Tsunade said as the Den Mushi's eyes closed. Naruto went to sleep on the couch. Better than listening to those guys snore. Naruto said, falling asleep. Morning. Achoo. Zoro sneezed, sleeping by the railing. Sounds like you're catching a cold. Luffy said from his spot on the Going Merry's figurehead. Impossible. Zoro exclaimed. I've never had a cold, someone must be talking about me. He said, closing his eyes. Luffy gained a thoughtful look. You know I've never gotten sick either. He said. Achoo. Nami sneezed. Bless you. Naruto said from his spot on the deck, looking at the clouds. Usopp from his spot working on his ammo turned his head when he heard Nami sneezed. Thank you. Nami said, sitting in a lawn chair. Someone must be talking about me. She said as she brushed some of her hair behind her ear. It's tough being this beautiful, they all talk about me. She said dramatically. Naruto smirked. You're not going to get any arguments from me. Nami looked down at Naruto and winked. What if Nojiko heard you say that? She teased. Naruto chuckled. She knows I'm only teasing. He said. Besides, even a blind man could tell you're beautiful. He replied as Nami smirked. Nojiko better watch out, I may steal you from her. She joked as Naruto opened his mouth. Boom. Aahhhh. Before Naruto could reply, Usopp's ammo suddenly exploded. Naruto started coughing as Usopp was knocked out. You alright, Nami? Naruto asked, standing up. Yeah, I'm alright, Nami said, dusting some soot off her. Naruto looked down at Usopp. Well, he's alright, just knocked out. Naruto said, poking Usopp with his foot. Nami snorted. Well, if he wasn't, I would've. She said, raising her fist. Calm down, Nami-chan, it was an accident. Naruto said, picking Usopp and setting him down in another lawn chair. Nojiko came running outside. What the hell was that? She asked, looking over to Nami, Naruto, and Usopp. Naruto waved dismissively. Nothing, Noji-chan. He said, pointing at Usopp. Usopp here just had an accident with some of his ammo. Nojiko sighed. Thank Kami. She said, hands on her hip. Naruto walked over and wrapped his hands around her waist and pulled in for a kiss. Hey, I think I see land, Luffy. Zoro said, getting up from his nap. Really, that's great. Luffy exclaimed, stretching his arms to pull him up to the top deck. Nami, Nojiko, Naruto, and Sanji, who came outside, all ran over to the front of the ship. So that's Logatown, huh? Naruto asked, looking at the island. I wonder if they have a market. Sanji asked, lighting a cigarette. The locals need food too. Nami said, hands on her hip. You're right. Sanji exclaimed. I hope they have a swords shop. Zoro said, leaning on the railing. Using Santoryu with only one sword isn't good. Usopp, now awake, walked over. I can't wait to see their equipment shop for some new gear. He exclaimed, hands behind his head. I want to check out their weapon shop. Naruto said, arm around Nojiko's waist. I like to check them out too, maybe some clothes shops also. Nojiko said, resting her head on Naruto's shoulder. So that's the island where Gold Roger was both born and executed. Luffy said, head down and one hand on his hat. Logatown. This is going to be fun. Luffy exclaimed, looking at Logatown. Every pirate here in the East Blue stops here before heading to the Grand Line to stock up. Nami exclaimed, hands on her hip. It has everything you need. She finished. If that's the case, I'm going on a shopping spree. Usopp said, looking around. I bet they have all sorts of stuff here. He exclaimed with a grin. Sanji started looking around. I'm going to stock up on some food. He said, taking a drag from his cigarette. Maybe I'll see some beautiful women. He said with a blush. I wonder if there is a swordsmith here. Zoro asked thoughtfully. Nami grinned. I thought you were broke, you going to steal one? Nami teased. Well, I'm going to see where they kill people. Luffy said with a grin. I want to see where the king of the pirates was killed. he said, running into the crowd. Luffy, wait, I know. And he's gone. Naruto said with a sigh, now wearing his trench coat. What were you going to say, Naruto-kun? Nojiko asked from her spot beside him. I was going to say I know where that platform is. Naruto said with a sigh. Oh well, I'm sure he'll find it. He said, grinning. Where should we all meet up? Naruto asked. How about right here under the sign? Nojiko asked, pointing at the sign. Okay, I'm going to find a weapons shop. Nojiko, did you want to go with me? Naruto asked as Nojiko thought. Sure, I'll go, but first can we stop at a clothing store? I want some new clothes. She said with a shrug. I'll go with you. Nami said, walking up to them after talking to Zoro. Naruto, Nami, and Nojiko walked off as the others went to shop around. Naruto, Nami, and Nojiko. Naruto was watching Nami and Nojiko try on clothes. How's this? Nami asked with a dress on. Looks good on you, Nami-chan. Naruto replied with a grin. Oh, Naru-kun. Naruto turned his head and saw Nojiko in a pair of blue bra and panties. Naruto rocketed back with a nosebleed. Well, I think he likes them, Nojiko-chan. Nami said with a grin as Nojiko put on her new clothes of blue jeans, a tank top and high heels. I know, I just wanted to tease him. Nojiko said, giggling. I'm going to pay for my clothes, are you? Nami shook her head. No, I'm not paying this much for clothes. She said as Naruto got up and wiped his nose. I'm paying, Nami. He said as Nami brightened. Okay, then I'll put my clothes with Nojiko's. Nami said, walking ahead with Nojiko. Well, here we are. Naruto said, stopping in front of a weapons shop with a big backpack on his back full of clothes. Nami, did you want anything? Naruto asked as Nami rubbed her chin. I'll look at what they have for a staff. She said as they walked in and saw every kind of weapons imaginable. Hello, how may I help you? A gruff voice greeted them. They looked over at the counter. A tall muscular man with short brown hair with some soot on his face walking in from downstairs, taking off a heavy apron. Hello, we're just browsing, thank you. Naruto said, looking around. The man nodded. My name's John, if you need help. John said, wiping his hands with a towel. Do you have any staffs? Nami asked as John pointed to the back of the store. Yes, they're in the back. He said as Nami walked back there. Naruto looked around and saw 2 pairs of trench knives with the blade extending over the knuckles. Picture awesomeness. Hey Nojiko. Naruto called Nojiko over. What do you think about using trench knives? He asked. They're interesting. I think I'll give them a try. She said as Naruto nodded and picked both sets up plus a couple of holsters. Alright, I'll need some more throwing knives, and a pistol. Nojiko looked over to him. A pistol, what for? She asked Naruto. For when we face a bunch of people with guns. He explained. Just a safety precaution. I may be good, but I won't run into a group who wielding nothing but guns. He finished walking over to the gun section of the store. Well, these are interesting. He said, looking at the odd pair of pistols. They look like they can fire more than one shot. Naruto said, picking up one. They're a new model from the South Blue. They shoot a .44 caliber. They're called revolvers. John explained. Mr. Five's gun. Naruto nodded. I'll take 4. He said, taking the pair up to the counter. And some throwing knives also. He said. Nojiko walked up beside him. Why are you getting 4 pistols? She asked. 2 I could understand, but 4. Naruto looked to her. 2 are for you. Nato said as John got holsters and ammo for them. For me? Nojiko asked with a confused look. Naruto nodded. Yes, for when I'm not around I won't have to worry about you. He said, looking back to Nami, and smirked. Looks like Nami had the same idea. He said as Nami walked over with 2 blue metal staffs. Klima tact. Find something you like, Nami-chan? Naruto asked as Nami nodded. Yes, there was even another one for Nojiko. She said and separated both staffs into 3 pieces. She placed both down plus the holster. Naruto paid for them and walked out the store. Well, anything else? Naruto asked with the trench knives in their holster on his lower back, and the revolvers on his hip in a reverse grip. He uses his right hand to grab the gun on his left hip and left hand to grab the gun on the right hip. No, Naruto-kun. Nojiko said with her trench knives in the same place as Naruto's, her guns on her hip in the regular grip, and her staff on her right leg same place as Nami kept hers. Nami shook her head. Me neither, Naruto-kun. Naruto nodded as they walked down He Street. As they were walking, Naruto looked in a pet store and saw something that caught his eye. Hey, I'll be right back, he said, walking inside. Nami and Nojiko followed him inside. A few minutes later, they saw Naruto giving the clerk, a young black-haired girl, some money. What are you buying, Naruto-kun? Nojiko asked as Naruto turned around and grinned with his coat buttoned up. Nami and Nojiko noticed something moving in his coat, and out popped a baby fox head from the opening of his coat and yipped. Kawaii. Nojiko and Nami yelled as they glomped the fox. I just bought him. Do you like him? Naruto asked as the girls nodded. Nojiko held him away from her to get a good look at the little fox. He was red, and had black on his paws and the tips of his ears, and white on the tip of his tail, with orange eyes. What's his name? Nojiko asked as the fox licked her nose. Kichi. Naruto said, rubbing Kichi's head. That means brave, right? Nami asked, petting Kichi's head after Naruto finished. He nodded with a smile. Yes, he said, picking Kichi up and putting him back in his coat, his head sticking out. He walked out with Nami and Nojiko walking beside him. Marine office. In a marine office on the other side of town was a room filled with smoke so thick you couldn't make anything out inside. Captain Smoker. A marine said, coming inside wearing a hat over his black hair. A message from HQ. The marine continued as a silhouette stood up. We've just received word that Monkey D, Luffy, and Uzumaki, Maelstrom, Naruto and their crew are headed here to Logatown with a 30 million bounty on Luffy, and 50 million berry bounty on Naruto. He finished with a salute. A 30 million berry bounty, I can't wait to meet him. Smoker said with a gruff voice. Sir, this is the pirate who's defeated the pirates Don Krieg, and Sawtooth, Arlong. The marine said. And then there's Naruto, who's the strongest bounty hunter from the East Blue, who's defeated pirates of at least 40 million bounties. The marine continued. I know Naruto, he's brought bounties here before. Smoker said, walking to a window and opening it to let the smoke out. As it cleared, Smoker, now visible, looked back to the marine. Now why so tense? Smoker said. Smoker is a muscular man with light blue-green hair, smoking 2 cigars at once. Shirtless, wearing blue jeans with a brown belt and large brown leather boots. It's just I've never faced pirates with this high bounties before. The marine said as Smoker stared at him. Well, I know Naruto's a strong fighter. From the last time he was here, I spared with him. Smoker said thoughtfully. Gave one hell of a fight even though he couldn't hit me. He continued. Even though the marine who gave him the bounty was corrupt, and now in jail, Naruto joined up with a pirate before we knew that. Smoker explained. HQ probably won't take his bounty off because of that. He finished. But Luffy's a mystery. Smoker said with a hand on his chin. Don't worry. Smoker said, walking towards his desk. Under my command, has there been a single pirate who's set foot that hasn't been arrested? He asked, putting on his jacket. A large, thick white and blue specialist marine jacket which he kept open with greenish fur lining the neck, wrists and hem. Many cigars are strapped to the jacket which has the kanji for justice on the back of it. He put a jute on his back. No, sir. The marine said worriedly. Then calm the hell down. Smoker said, putting on brown gloves. Another marine came running in. Reporting, sir. He said with a salute. I've just received word that a pirate group has just arrived. Smoker looked to him. You're requested there at once. The marine finished. That must be Luffy and Naruto. The first marine exclaimed. A 30 million berry bounty, huh? Smoker said, walking out the door. This'll be interesting. He said thoughtfully. Huh? You say something, sir? The new marine asked. Just talking to myself. Smoker said over his shoulder. Sir, wait. The first marine said as Smoker left. Don't you want this? He said, holding up Luffy's poster. Outside. Captain, you need to tell us what your orders are. A Marine said, walking behind Smoker. No. Smoker said plainly. Sir, do you even know who these pirates defeated? The Marine asked. Smoker stopped and looked over his shoulder with a dark glare. You're annoying me. Smoker said, scaring the Marine. I'm in command here, he said as the Marine saluted. Understood, sir. The Marine exclaimed. Where's Tashigi? Smoker asked, calming down. The Marine thought for a moment before replying. Sir, Tashigi said she had some errands to do but said she'd try to make it back in time for training. He said as Smoker sighed. Irresponsible girl, where'd she go? He asked. Yeah, I've got ice cream. A little blonde-haired girl in a pink dress exclaimed, running with her ice cream cone. Be careful, honey, don't drop it. The girl's father said, walking behind her wearing a long-sleeved shirt and shorts. The girl ran into someone's leg and spilt her ice cream on the person's pants. She looked up and saw Smoker looking down at her with a blank look. Captain Smoker. The girl's father exclaimed. The little girl started tearing up. My ice cream, she said as her father started sprouting apologies. Smoker kneeled down and gave the girl a gold coin. Here, go buy yourself 5 scoops. He said with a smile, standing up and walking away. Thank you. The girl and her father said as Smoker waved over his shoulder. Later. You all should feel honored. A tall, lanky pirate with gray hair, black mustache, and black-gray goatee wearing a unique-looking tricorn and red coat said. The middle corner of the hat is curved down in a way that it resembles the top half of a crescent moon. You've given your stuff to the next king of the pirates. He exclaimed. Who's in charge here? A gruff voice said behind the pirates. They all turned and saw a tall, muscular guy smoking 2 cigars. Who wants to know? The pirate asked with a sneer. So you're Monkey D. Luffy. Smoker asked. You're not worth 30 million, you're not even worth the price of my grandmother's fake teeth. Smoker said as the pirate gained a tick mark. How dare you speak to me like that? He yelled at Smoker. Suddenly smoke started swirling around Smoker as the pirates looked on, jaws dropped. Nami, Naruto, and Nojiko. Naruto, Nami, and Nojiko was sitting at a table outside a restaurant. Captain Smoker. Nami asked, petting Kichi, who was sitting on her lap sleeping. Naruto nodded. Yes, I forgot this is where he was stationed at. Naruto explained after they finished eating. Is he strong? Nojiko asked with her hand supporting her head. He's one of the strongest Marines here in the East Blue. Naruto explained. Ever since he's been stationed here, no pirates who stop here have left. He said as Nami and Nojiko gained worriedly expressions. He's also a Logia-type devil fruit user. Naruto finished as Nami's eyes widened, and Nojiko's gained a confused expression. Logia type? Nojiko asked. Logia type devil fruits gives the user the ability to become an element or a force of nature. Naruto explained. Smoker has the Moku Moku no Mi plume plume fruit. He continued. He can turn into smoke at will, physical attacks won't work on them. He said as Nojiko nodded. Can they be defeated? She asked as Naruto nodded. Yes, by sea stones, falling into the ocean, their abilities' natural weakness, sneak attacks could work too. He finished as they finished their drinks. Smoker. Smoker just defeated the pirates and tied them up. Congratulations, sir, you've captured Luffy. A Marine said as Smoker looked ahead. You idiot, this isn't Luffy, anybody could see that. Smoker said, annoyed. If this piece of trash is worth 30 million, I'd become a pirate. Smoker joked. Well then, where is he? The Marine asked as Smoker saw a teen wearing a straw hat, red vest, and blue shorts. Where's that execution platform? This looks like the docks. He said, looking around. The teen spotted Smoker and jogged over, waving. Hey, I need some help. The teen asked, looking up at Smoker. Do you know where they execute people around here? He asked as Smoker stared at him. Platform? Smoker asked as the teen looked around. Yeah, I just can't seem to find it. He asked confusedly. I haven't seen you before. Smoker said as the teen grinned. Yeah, it's my first time here. He said, looking around. The town's bigger than I thought, and I got lost. The teen said as Smoker took a drag from his cigars. Why do you want to go to the platform? Smoker asked as the teen looked down, his hat covering his eyes. Personal quest. He said plainly. I want to see where the king of the pirates was killed. The teen said with a big grin as Smoker's eyes widened. I guess you don't know then, oh well. The teen said, leaving. Wait. Smoker said, stopping the teen. Just follow the smoke. He said as Smoke left, his mouth floating in a direction to his left. Great, thanks. The teen said, running off with Smoker looking at his retreating form. Zoro. Damn, all these swords are expensive. Zoro complained, looking at the swords in the store window. He remembers earlier. You wanna borrow money? Sure. That'll be 300% interest. Nami said, grinning before running to catch up with Naruto and Nojiko. Zoro sighed. I can't afford to borrow any more money from Nami. He thought. There's gotta be a way to raise more money. He finished. Suddenly he heard a commotion. He turned around to see two guys with swords stopping a woman. The woman was average height with dark blue hair, wearing a floral design green short-sleeved shirt, blue jeans, with red framed glasses, holding a wrapped up sword. Move. The woman said plainly. I'm warning you, I'm not afraid to fight. She warned. As the two men laughed, the men brought their swords to attack. Zoro was about to intervene until he saw the woman pull out the sword she was holding. As soon as the sheath hit the ground, the two men was unconscious with the woman behind them holding her sword behind her above her head. She suddenly tripped and her glasses fell off. Zoro picked them up and walked over to her. Hey, you dropped these. Oh, thank you. The woman said, looking up. Zoro tensed, and was wide-eyed that the woman looks like his childhood friend. Kuina. He thought. Could I have my glasses back now? She asked. Crack. Zoro gripped the glasses too hard and broke them. The woman glared at him. You're going to pay for those. She said as Zoro started sweating. Luffy. Man, where am I? Luffy asked, looking around the alleys around him. Man, I keep getting lost. He said, walking down some stairs. Suddenly something caught his eye. He looked up and saw a sign for a bar. Gold Roger. He read the sign. He walked down the stairs of the entrance and walked inside. There was no one there, and the bar was dirty, and all the chairs were on the tables. He looked to his right and saw an old man with a hat and sunglasses staring at him. Excuse me, do you work here? Luffy asked the old man. I wanted to ask about your sign. How did you get the name? He asked, walking towards the bar. Scram. The old man said, drinking. This isn't the place for kids. He said coldly. Besides, we're closed for good starting today. The old man said, pouring another glass for himself. Going out of business? Luffy asked, sitting on a stool. Nope. Retiring. The old man replied. Okay, I was just wondering about the name. Luffy said, leaning on the bar. You see, I'm looking for the execution platform. He explained. Do you know where it's at? He asked. He looked to the old man and saw a skull on the table. Wow, that's a human skull. He said as the old man looked down. Killer giant. The old man started explaining. One of the most fiercest pirate to ever sail the Grand Line. He said, swirling his cup around. Until Gold Roger killed him with one move. He said as Luffy eyes widened. Gold Roger. He said as the old man nodded. Yep, with lightning speed. The old man exclaimed, arms in the air. Tell me more. Luffy said as the old man finished his story. Hell yeah. Luffy said when the old man finished. Gold Roger is what a pirate is supposed to be. Luffy exclaimed, hat shadowing his eyes. That's why I'm going to find the One Piece and become the next king of the pirates. He exclaimed as the man's eyes widened and Gold Roger took Luffy's place for a moment. The man walked behind the bar. Let's have a drink, he said as Luffy shook his head. No thanks, I don't drink, he said as the old man grinned. Okay, how about some milk then? He asked, putting 2 glasses of milk down and raised his. To the king of the pirates. Luffy grinned and raised his glass. To the king of the pirates, he said, and clanked their glasses. Later after Luffy left, Smoker walked into the bar. Oh, it's you, he said, seeing Smoker. Is that the way to greet your only customer? Smoker asked, grinning. Cut the crap. The man said, slamming his hands on the bar. You can't wait for me to close up. He said as Smoker sat down. It's not my fault all the pirates turned into cowards. He said as the old man got up to do the dishes. Smoker noticed the 2 glasses on the bar. Well, that's nice you had a costumer. He said with a smirk. I'll take some rum, old man. Smoker ordered. I don't have any for you. He said as Smoker pulled a bottle over with his smoke. Today's a celebration. Smoker exclaimed, drinking from the bottle. The day Gold Roger was executed. Smoker started talking about the day he saw Gold Roger executed. Hey, a male voice interrupted his thoughts. Here's some new wanted posters. A Marine said, holding 2 posters. Smoker looked over his shoulder. Captain Smoker. The Marine said, dropping the posters, and saluted. Smoker walked over to pick up the posters. Well, that's Naruto all right, he said, looking at Naruto's poster. He looked over to the other one and widened his eyes. So he was Monkey D. Luffy. He said, walking out the door. Luffy. That's where the king of the pirates was executed. Luffy said, looking up at the platform. He gulped. The place where the greatest pirate who ever lived was killed, and when the Great Pirate Era was started. He stated seriously. Naruto, Nojiko, and Nami. Naruto, the girls, and Kichi, now being held by Nojiko, were walking down a street. Well, is there any sights you want to see? Naruto asked as the girls shook their heads. No, Naruto-kun, Nojiko said with a smile, hugging Kichi. Whatever you want to do, Naruto. Nami said, shrugging. As they continued walking, Naruto spotted a flyer on a wall. It had the picture of a bald, muscular guy with brown eyebrows, and brown eyes, a few scars on his face, and body, standing holding up a briefcase. Naruto read what was on it out loud. Can you beat the current champ's winning streak? Try your luck. First person to beat the champ gets $500,000 berries. Well, should I give it a try? Naruto asked Nojiko, and Nami. Hell yeah, you can win that easy. Nami exclaimed with a grin. Naruto shrugged. Yeah, maybe. It'll at least be a time waster. He said, walking in the direction that the poster gave. After walking for a few minutes, they came up to the place set up for the contest. A crowd was around the small area that was cleared for the fights with metal barricades. Well, this looks like the place. Naruto stated, looking around for the sign-up sheet. Naruto, I think you sign up there. Nojiko said, pointing over to a table with a man with short brown hair, brown eyes, wearing black shorts, a dark red shirt and sandals. Hello. The man said when Naruto, Nojiko, and Nami walked over. Are you here to sign up? He asked as Naruto nodded. Yes. Is there many people competing? He asked as the man nodded. Yes, quite a few. He said, handing Naruto a pen. Suddenly they heard someone scream, and flew over their heads, landing on the other side of the street. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Was that champion's doing? He asked. The man nodded. Yeah, it was. He answered. He's a professional fighter who's traveled over the seas. He said as Naruto took a look around, looking at the crowd. Kinda small for something like this. Naruto said as the man rubbed his head. Well, there's a few contests that are going on today. In fact, there's a cooking contest going on a little while later after this. He said as Naruto looked at Nami and Nojiko. Well, at least we will know where Sanji will be. He said as Nami nodded. Yeah, at the very least he'll be in the audience. She replied with a hand on her chin. Okay, when do I get to fight? Naruto asked. Your fight will be last, but there is only a few matches left. The man replied as Naruto nodded and walked into the crowd to look at the fights before his. When he got in a seat with Nami and Nojiko. Well, that's the guy on the flyer. Naruto stated, seeing the champion. He's wearing karate pants taped off at the ankles with black tape, barefoot and shirtless, finishing fighting one of the competitors. Winner Dan. The referee said, raising the now identified champion's arm. He looks strong, Naruto-kun. Nojiko stated, looking at Dan. Well, the guy at the sign-up did say he's a professional fighter. Naruto said thoughtfully. He's bound to be real strong. He finished, seeing the next fighter come up after a few minutes break. The fighter was just under 6 feet with short blonde hair, wearing brown pants, shirtless, and brown shoes. The next challenger Nori. The referee announced the blonde-haired fighter. Dan and Nori got into their stances. Hajime. The referee started the match. Nori started with a quick kick but Dan blocked it. Dan hit Nori in the head with a strong right hand, knocking Nori back a few feet. Dan tried to kick Nori but he blocked it with his arm, and followed with a kick to Dan's gut. "They're really good, I can hardly see their moves." Nojiko commented watching the fight. Nami nodded. "Yeah, they are." Nami agreed as she looked over to Naruto and saw him staring at the match intensely. "Something wrong, Naruto-kun?" Nami asked. Naruto turned to her. "Just thinking up some strategies for my fight," he replied thoughtfully. "Anything good?" Nojiko asked, petting Kichi. Naruto sighed. "It'll be hard. I'm sure one of the rules is no killing, or lethal moves," he said, rubbing the back of his head. "I'll need to hold back, and that's something I'm not used to doing," he said with sigh. "There's even the chance Dan's holding back too." Nami and Nojiko gained confused looks. "Why would he hold back?" Nami asked as Naruto shrugged. "A bit paranoid, I guess," he said with a shrug. "I'm just used to fighting people who come at me with the intent to kill," he finished. They looked over and saw Dan standing over a unconscious Nori. "We'll continue with the last fight after a 30-minute break," the announcer said over the speakers. Naruto stood up and took off his guns, trench knives, coat, shirt, necklace, and his pouch. "Keep these safe for me, Nami-chan, Nojiko-chan," Naruto said, walking away. "I'm going to go warm up," he said over his shoulder. "Good luck, Naruto-kun," the girls said, folding his clothes on their laps, and setting his weapons on top of them. 30 minutes later, Naruto, after stretching, stood in the middle of the ring, arms crossed. Dan walked over and stood in front of him. "You know," Dan said as Naruto started at him. "I've always wanted to fight you, Maelstrom." Dan finished as Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Really?" he asked skeptically as Dan nodded. "Yes, you're one of the people I've wanted to fight," Dan said, putting his hand forward to shake Naruto's. Naruto shook his hand and back up a few feet. "All right, there's only a couple of rules," the referee stated, walking in between Naruto and Dan. "First, no lethal moves, or killing." The referee started as Naruto sighed. "Called it," Naruto thought, looking at Dan. "I'll need to hold back, at least for now," he finished as the referee continued. "Second, no below the belt," he said, looking between Naruto and Dan. "Third, the match will end when your opponent submits, gets knocked out, or cannot continue fighting." He raised his hand. "Last, when I say match is over, the match is over," he finished. "Fighters ready?" he asked as Naruto and Dan nodded. "Then the last match between Uzumaki Naruto and the champion Dan will," he said, bringing his hand down. "Hajime." The ref got out of the way as Naruto and Dan charged at each other. Naruto tried to kick Dan in the side, but he caught it and flung Naruto a few feet away from him. Naruto jumped up onto his feet as Dan rushed at his and tried to punch him. Naruto blocked it and followed with a punch of his own. Dan stumbled back a bit before regaining his bearing and stared at Naruto. "Is that the best you can do?" Dan asked as Naruto looked at him. "Well, I can't use my more dangerous moves because I'll get disqualified," Naruto said before smirking. "Besides, I'm just getting warmed up," he said, running at Dan, kicking him in the head. Naruto then puts Dan in a sleeper hold. The referee got in front of Dan. "Do you give?" he asked as Dan shook his head. Dan pushed against Naruto, grabbed his head, and dropped down, making Naruto let go. "Naruto-kun's really holding back," Nojiko stated, looking at Naruto and Dan trade punches and kicks. "Yeah, I know. If he didn't have to, I think this would be over soon," Nami said, petting Kichi's head as he yipped. "Maybe we can't assume Naruto would have an easy time if he wasn't holding back," Nojiko said, head resting in her hands. "Dan could be as strong as Naruto also," she finished, looking back to the fight. Back in the ring, Naruto and Dan, who were sweating a little and panting, stood in front of each other. You live up to your reputation, Uzumaki. Dan stated, getting into his stance. You're good too, Naruto said before running at Dan and tried to jump kick him. Dan dodged and Naruto stopped before hitting the barrier. As Naruto turned around, Dan speared him through the barrier. Oh my Kami! The announcer exclaimed. They went through the barrier. Nami and Nojiko gasped as Naruto and Dan laid there motionless. Naruto groaned and wobbly stood up. Wow, Naruto said, shaking his head. He looked down at Dan, picked him up and tried to punch him, but Dan dodged to the left and pushed him back, grabbed an empty folding chair and hit Naruto over the head. He threw the chair into the rind and grabbed Naruto and carried him over to the middle of the ring. Naruto, getting his bearing back, kneed Dan in the gut and round kicked him in the head. Dan stumbled back a bit, ran at Naruto, kicked him in the knee, grabbed his arm and put him in an armbar submission. Naruto grunted in pain. After a few moments he rolled over and broke free. After rubbing his arm for a few moments, Naruto then tried to kick Dan, but he blocked it, grabbed the foot, turned it over and applied an ankle lock. Naruto pushed up on his hands, turned over and kicked Dan off. Doing a kip up, Naruto ran over to Dan and tried stomping on his head, but Dan dodged it, rolling over and knocking Naruto on the ground. Dan stomped on Naruto's chest a couple of times before kicking him away to the middle of the ring. As Naruto was getting up, he looked to the ground and smirked. As soon as he saw Dan's feet, Naruto jumped in the air, grabbed Dan's head and descended to the ground. Onto the chair Dan threw into the ring earlier. Naruto sat on the ground holding his right shoulder. The referee looked to Dan and saw he was knocked out. Winner Uzumaki Naruto, the referee exclaimed as the crowd cheered. Naruto smiled as he walked over to the man with red hair in a suit holding a large briefcase. Here's your pre. He started until Nami grabbed it and walked away with a skip in her step. It's okay, she's with me, Naruto said sheepishly. Nojiko walked over with Kichi walking beside her as she handed Naruto his things. That was great, Naruto-kun, Nojiko said with a kiss to the cheek. Naruto smiled and picked up Kichi and put him back into his coat. Naruto heard groaning. Wow. Naruto looked down and saw Dan looking up at him. That was a good match, Naruto said, pulling Dan up to his feet. Yeah, I hope I can face you again, he said, rubbing his head. Naruto shrugged. Hopefully, you never know, Naruto said, shaking Dan's hand. A little later, Naruto was sitting down on a bench as Nami and Nojiko was eating sandwiches. Are you going to be okay, Naruto-kun? Nojiko asked as Naruto was rubbing his shoulder. Yeah, I just need to rest a bit when we get back to Mary, Naruto said with a smile. We really need to get a doctor soon, Nojiko said worriedly. Naruto gave her a warm smile. I'm fine, let's look around for everyone, he said, standing up as the girls left with him. Luffy was climbing the platform when he heard a male voice behind him. Hey you. He turned around and saw Smoker staring up at him. I'm busy now, can it wait? Luffy asked, holding on to the platform. You're him, right? The guy with the second highest bounty in the East Blue? He asked as a small storm cloud formed over Luffy's head. Yeah, that's me, Luffy said dejectedly, almost falling off the platform. I'm Captain Smoker, stationed here, and you're under arrest. Now where's Naruto? Smoker asked as Luffy stared down at him. Arrest? Screw that, I need to sail to the Grand Line and become king of the pirates, Luffy said seriously as Smoker's eyes widened. I also don't know where Naruto is, he finished as Smoker sighed. Okay, I'll find him later, now come down, Smoker said as Luffy shook his head. No, I'm not getting arrested in this town, he said. Smoker looked at him, hands on his hip. You'll need to beat me first to go to the Grand Line, Smoker said, cracking his knuckles. That's the rule of this town, he finished as Luffy stared down at him. All right, Luffy said and got ready to attack, bringing his fist back. Gomu Gomu no. Gum Gum. Luffy tried stretching his arm but slipped and got stuck, stomach stretching long. Devil fruit, Smoker thought, seeing Luffy stretch. Man, my feet are stuck, Luffy said, holding his hat. Stop playing around and get down here, Smoker yelled up at Luffy. Alright, hold on, my feet are stuck. Luffy said, pulling his feet off the platform. Alright, Gomu Gomu no. Dot. Pistol, gum gum pistol. Luffy shot his fist towards Smoker and he dodged. He punched Luffy in the side of his face, appeared in front and kicked him high in the air. This kid's worth 30 million. Smoker thought, staring at Luffy. I don't even need my powers for him. He finished as Luffy jumped off the platform and tried punching Smoker, but Smoker countered with a punch, sending Luffy into the platform hard and hitting the ground. You know, Smoker said, walking over to Luffy. I was there on the day Gold Roger died. He started explaining. His final moments were proud, worthy of the king of the pirates. He finished staring down at Luffy. But you, King. He continued. You can't even get to the Grand Line. He said, seeing Luffy try to get up. Just stay down. Smoker said. There's no point. Luffy got up and looked back with a grin. Maybe, but I won't know unless I try. Luffy said and shot his leg back. Gomu Gomu no. Muchi, gum gum whip. Luffy stretched his leg hoping to kick Smoker, who leaned to the left and let Luffy's leg wrapped around a fountain. Oh man. Luffy said before spinning around the fountain and shooting away in the air. Crap, I missed. Luffy exclaimed before flying out of sight. Smoker stared at him before Luffy flew out of sight. Naruto, Nami, and Nojiko. Naruto and the girls were wandering around looking for everyone when they heard screaming. Ah, they looked up and saw Luffy flying by them fast. Well, that's strange, Naruto said with a sweat drop. Nami sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. Idiot, she said plainly as Nojiko giggled. Luffy crashed into the ground on the other end of town, scaring everyone there. Man, what a flight, Luffy said plainly, looking up to the sky. I really went far, he said as people started gathering round him. What should I do now? He asked as he yawned. I know, a nap, he finished with a grin. He pulled his hat over his head and fell asleep. Hey, are you alright? Someone asked Luffy. I think he's dead, another exclaimed. Zoro, and Tashigi were walking down a busy street when Zoro spoke up. Hey, where are we going? He asked Tashigi. I still can't believe you broke my glasses. She stated, still annoyed at Zoro. I told you I would pay you back. Zoro said, stopping for a second. Pay me back? You look like you're broke. Tashigi said as Zoro stiffened. Yeah, Zoro said as he started to sweat. I knew it, I could tell just by looking at you. Tashigi said, stopping to stare at Zoro. I don't care about your sob story, just follow me. Tashigi said, walking into a marine building. Crap, Zoro thought, following Tashigi inside. Here, Tashigi said, handing Zoro a bucket and mop. Our janitor quit this morning. She said, then suddenly smiled. Once you work for the Marines, you won't have money trouble. She finished as Zoro's eyebrow twitched. Not a chance in hell, he stated, handing the bucket and mop back. I don't work for Marines, he said as Tashigi gained an angry look. Well, I expect to be paid in full, Tashigi said to Zoro, annoyed. Zoro sighed, pulling back the mop and bucket. A Marine came up behind them and saluted. Time for training, Sergeant Major Tashigi, he said as Tashigi started walking down the hall. I'll be back to check up on you, she said, turning in a door. Crap, she's a sergeant, he said as he started cleaning. Outside, Naruto, Nojiko, and Nami, now clutching the briefcase tightly, walked down the street. Shopping and getting money, two things I love doing, Nami said, happily walking in front of Naruto and Nojiko. Suddenly they walked past a billboard with Naruto's and Luffy's posters. Nami's and Nojiko's eyes widened. They heard a door opened and saw Zoro putting out a trash can, grumbling. What's Zoro doing with the Marines? Nami asked. He must have gotten in trouble with one and is working his department off, Naruto said with a shrug. Should we help him? Nojiko asked as Naruto shook his head. No, he's not in big trouble, plus they would have arrested him if they recognized him, he said, walking away. They'll know he's with Luffy if I go in to help him out, he finished as the girls followed him. Inside, Zoro was mopping the floor. Damn, this will take all day, he said, grabbing two more mops and clean faster. Hey, He heard a voice behind him, "You're Zoro." A Marine said, recognizing him. "What are you doing cleaning?" The other asked. "Intel says you've joined up with Monkey D. Luffy's crew. You're ruined." He was interrupted by Zoro attacking them with the mops, knocking them out. "Time to leave," Zoro said, dropping the mops, writing a note, and leaving some money, and left. Later. "Man, she looks like Kuina," Zoro thought, walking down the street. "Not to mention she's a swordsman too." He finished walking into a weapons shop. "I'd like to buy some swords," he said. The person at the counter, a short man, with black hair that goes to the sides of his head, he has tan skin and wears a blue shirt, and a red nose. The man stood up and greeted him. "Of course," he said as Zoro put his money on the counter. "I've only got 100,000 berries," he said as the owner sat back down and sighed. "I can only give you 2 dull swords," he said as Zoro shrugged. "I'll make do," Zoro said as the man caught a glimpse at the sword on Zoro's waist. Could it be? He thought. "Can I see your sword?" he asked as Zoro gained a confused look. "My sword, why?" he asked. "Please," the man asked again as Zoro shrugged. "Sure," Zoro said, handing his sword over to the owner. The man's eyes widened, pulling the sword out slightly. "This is a nice sword you got here," he stated. "I'll buy it for $200,000 berries," he offered as Zoro raised an eyebrow. "What, no way, it's my sword," he said as the man continued making offer after offer. "Okay, my last offer $800. He started before being interrupted. "Hey, is my sword ready?" Tashigi asked, walking up to the counter. "Hey, you're okay," she said to Zoro. "She's not very bright," Zoro thought as Tashigi started talking about the 2 Marines who were attacked. "Besides, I've already gotten new glasses." She finished putting on her new pair before looking at Zoro's sword. She smiled and pulled the sword from its sheath. "Is this Wado Ikimanji?" she asked, looking at the sword. "It must be one of the 21 Wazamano blades," she exclaimed, pulling out a small book and skimming through it. "Yeah, here it is. How do you have this sword?" she asked as the owner shouted at her. "Shut up." He pulled out a sword with a white and green sheath and star-shaped guard, and threw it to her. "Here's Shigur, I don't want to see you here again," he said as Tashigi caught it, and stumbled around and knocked a display down. "Get you." He was interrupted by a male voice. Now that's no way to talk to a woman. Everyone turned around and saw Naruto at the doorway. "Naruto-kun," Zoro and Tashigi said together as Naruto smiled. "Hey Tashigi-chan," Naruto said with a wave. Tashigi walked over. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I was walking past when I saw you in here," he replied, shrugging. "I see you've met my friend," he said, pointing to Zoro. "Yeah, I was asking him how he had that sword," she said, pointing to Zoro's sword. "He was trained by the original's owner father," Naruto said as Tashigi's eyes widened. "How do you know?" she asked Naruto. "That's what he told me when I asked when we first met," he said as Zoro sighed and nodded. "Yeah, she was the only person I couldn't beat no matter how hard I trained," Zoro said thoughtfully. "We even made a promise that we wouldn't stop until one of us became the world's best swordsman," he continued. "Well, why doesn't she still have the sword?" Tashigi asked as Zoro's mood softened. "She died shortly after we made that promise," he stated as Tashigi gasped. "How?" she asked as Zoro sighed. "She was killed," he said, putting the sword back on his waist. "After that I asked her father for this sword to carry on her memory and the promise we made," he said, looking at Naruto. "Where are the girls?" he asked as Naruto shrugged. "They're putting the stuff we bought, and some money I won on the boat," he replied before turning to Tashigi. "You're not going to arrest me?" he asked as Tashigi shook her head. "No," she said plainly. "I know Nezumi was corrupted, and I know you don't deserve that bounty," she explained. "Unless I'm ordered to, I won't," she finished. The store owner made himself known. "Man, did she ever help you?" he said before pointing to some barrels on the other side of the store. "The swords in those barrels are $50,000 each," he said, annoyed as Zoro and Naruto walked over to the barrels. "What the hell's that guy's problem?" Zoro asked as Naruto shrugged. He's just pissed at not getting your sword. He said looking through the barrels with Zoro. You must lose a lot of swords if you carry that many with you. Tashigi said as Naruto turned to her and spoke. Akuli, my friend here is practicing Santoryu. He said as Tashigi's eyes widened. Like that bounty hunter Rarano Zoro? She asked as Zoro chuckled. Oh yeah, that guy. Zoro said as he continued looking. Yeah, he's a really good swordsman. She said then her mood soured. But he's a bounty hunter. She said as Naruto raised an eyebrow. What's that got to do with anything? He asked as Tashigi turned her attention to him. A swordsman who's a bounty hunter, or pirate is not an honorable swordsman. She said as Naruto snorted. Being a bounty hunter, or a pirate doesn't mean if he's a honorable swordsman or not. Naruto explained. I've met Rarano Zoro and he's one of if not the most honorable swordsman I've ever met. Naruto said staring at Tashigi. How many times have people thought you weren't a good swordsman because you were a woman? He asked as Tashigi's head dropped. Don't judge a book by the cover. He continued as he went back to looking through the barrels. He told me the only reason he became a bounty hunter was so he could have money to eat. Naruto said with a sigh. It doesn't matter if the person is a bounty hunter, a pirate or a marine. He said looking up to Tashigi. I've met pirates more honorable than marines, there are a lot of marines like Nezumi, or the ones who've betrayed my parents who've let the power go to their heads and do whatever they want. He finished as Tashigi nodded her head. You're right, she said softly. Before you say anything about Zoro, talk to him first. Naruto finished. Suddenly Tashigi felt some touch her leg. She looked down and saw a small fox looking up to her and yipped. Kawi, she said picking the fox up. His name's Kichi, I just bought him. Naruto said as Tashigi started asking about Kichi. Zoro, too engrossed in looking for swords, ignored their conversation. Suddenly he grabbed the hilt of one. This sword, Zoro thought, pulling out a katana. It's in a red sheath with a gold band around the middle of the sheath and its red handle. Is that? Tashigi asked as she gave Naruto Kichi, pulled out her book and scanned through it. It is Sandai Kitetsu. Tashigi said as Zoro pulled the blade out and examined it. What's that sword doing here in the cheap bins? She asked as the owner suddenly shouted. I can't sell it. Tashigi sighed. I knew it was a mistake, it's an expensive sword. She said as the owner shook his head. It's not that, he said as Zoro took a few swings with the sword. It's cursed, isn't it? He asked as the owner looked on in shock. How did you know? He asked as Zoro looked at the blade. Just a feeling, he said as the owner explained. Every owner has died wielding that sword, and you will too if you buy it. The owner said as Zoro picked up the sword and smirked. Sounds great, I'll take it. Zoro said as the owner yelled. I can't let you. The owner was hit by a woman. Don't be a fool and sell it. She said as the owner's eyebrow twitched. Don't hit me, he yelled as Zoro stared at the sword. You really want this sword? Naruto asked as Zoro shrugged. Yeah, let's see what's better, this curse or my luck. He said, throwing the sword in the air, making it spin and holding his right arm out. Tashigi tried to stop him, but Naruto stopped her. Wait, he said as everyone watched with bated breath. The sword came down and the dull side hit Zoro's arm and went through the floor. Everyone let out their breath. Tashigi almost fell to the floor if Naruto hadn't caught her. I'll take it, Zoro said as he kneeled down and picked up the sword. Hey you, Zoro said looking at Tashigi. You have a good eye, help me look for another one. He said as Tashigi nodded her head. Sure, she said and started helping look through until the owner shouted. Wait. And ran upstairs and brought back something wrapped in a cloth. He unwrapped it and showed a long katana with a black handle. It had a cross-shaped guard and a black lacquered sheath. He pulled the sword out, showing the blade itself was normal in appearance and its pattern was Midoriba, a regular pattern. This is Yubashiri, the finest sword in the shop. The owner said as Zoro took a quick glance at it. I can't afford it, he said, going back to looking in the barrels. I'll give it to you free of charge. The owner said. Even Sandai Kitetsu, he said as Zoro raised an eyebrow. He took the swords and he and Naruto walked out. See you later, Tashigi-chan. Naruto said, waving as he left. Bye, Naruto-kun. Tashigi said, waving. You've just gave away our best sword. The woman beside the owner said. I know, but that sword belongs in the hand of a true swordsman. The man replied. I wonder who that guy with Naruto-kun was. Tashigi asked, looking where Naruto and Zoro went. Outside, Zoro was walking with Naruto right arm resting on his swords. It feels great having 3 swords again. He said happily. Yeah, now you just have to worry about paying back Nami-chan. Naruto said as Zoro stopped for a second and cursed. Damn it, he said with a sigh. Luffy. Meanwhile, Luffy, now awake, is looking for the platform. Where is it? He asked, walking backwards. Suddenly a person in a cloak backed into him. Where is he? Where is he? The person asked as both kept looking in the opposite direction of each other. Where's that platform? Luffy asked, looking to his left. The cloaked person, now looking the same way, said. That way. Luffy grinned and ran off in that direction. Thanks. He said, running down the street. Ahhhh. That was Straw Hat. The person in the cloak yelled. Smoker. Luffy and his crew are still in Logatown, we need to arrest them. A marine ordered as other ran out of Smoker's office. Smoker took a drag from his cigars. I hate it when people yell. He said, looking up to the ceiling. Straw Hat won't hide, he'll find me. He said. Captain Smoker, what's wrong? Tashigi asked, running in the office, now wearing a blue leather coat with white fur lining the collar and wrist, and white gloves. Smoker looked to Tashigi. Where have you been? He asked her. I went to get sugar, I also saw Naruto. Tashigi replied as Smoker sighed. And you didn't arrest him? He asked as Tashigi looked sheepish. No, you and I both know he didn't deserve that bounty, so unless I'm ordered to, I won't. She said, arms crossed under her bust. Captain Smoker. 2 Marines said, coming in limping. You two are okay, I'm glad. Tashigi said as Smoker straightened up in his seat. Roronoa, Zoro's the one who attacked us. One said, leaning on the wall. Why would he attack you 2 imbeciles? Smoker asked. Because we tried to arrest him for teaming up with a pirate. The other explained. Smoker sighed. I'll get you, Straw Hat. He said a bit darkly. You won't escape me again. He finished, looking out the window.